Hey everybody, welcome to week 2 of Visual Narratives online course. I'm not keeping track of it that way, let's just call it the March 31st class, shall we? Yes. Hope everyone's doing well. I hope you're safe and feeling healthy and keeping busy. Again, if you're not busy, then we have some stuff to do. So I'd like to get right to it. First off, I just want to, in person, is this in person? Let's just say it's in person. Say thanks so much about full participation in the discussion forums, which is great. It's more than I could have hoped. And the quality of your answers in the discussion forum was also quite excellent in terms of your visual narrative analyses. And because of that, of course, I'd like to respond to them. And of course, it's a little difficult to respond to every single one of them because all 25 of you analyzed 3 paintings apiece, which means that I have to address 75 different items. And that's kind of a lot, considering I've got other work that I have to do as well. So what I wanted to do is make this a little more like a discussion, like a live situation, and pull some of the answers from the discussion forum to the paintings and read them aloud. I'll keep the student name anonymous just because I don't want to call anybody out if you don't want to be called out, but if you know it's yours, you'll probably recognize it, so that'll make you feel happy. I hope to be able to do that with the majority of the students in the class by the end of the semester, have something read from them. I am kind of choosing based on not necessarily the accuracy of the answer, but the thoroughness with which the student decided to answer. So yeah, so kind of my choice, but also it makes sense. So when you hear what I have to say after I read the discussion board answer, I will also read my notes on that particular painting, and we'll see how that matches up. So let's start with Elisa and Fusa's L'altra Eva 8, and I will read the, first let's just find out who, okay, and just a moment here, sorry. Okay, so here's the student answer from the discussion board on L'altra Eva 8 by Elisa and Fuso. The atmosphere of this piece is suspended halfway between reality and fiction. Not dreamlike, but more of a suspended moment between consciousness and unconsciousness. One can even say floating between the real and surreal, like a middle consciousness. The figure's posture reveals a kind of child's restlessness, but nothing flows within the cold composure of the figure. The background seems very staged, the extravagant clothes and the headgear, rich in lace, and a presence of cakes, says to me, and presents itself as a reference to gluttony and being blinded by the sight, smell, and taste of food even when you are full. One of the more impactful things about this piece is the way in which the animal sweets and laces seem to come out of the page in this constantly evolving fairy tale. I like that sort of surreal take on the whole thing. It does have a very surreal quality to it, a surreal edge without being overtly surrealistic because it's such a staged still life and figure. The only thing that may be construed as surreal is just the presence of animals, the moths and birds sort of flocking in that one zone. But narratively, you see how that answer expanded out into a surrealist kind of territory, which I really like. Here's my notes on it. And Fuso's symbols act as the perfect vehicle by which to tell a story that is open to multiple interpretations. Hey, there you go. Although she does let us in on some secret when she says that for her, quote, the birds represent the 7 deadly sins that attack the purity of the girl. The moths are a symbol of the soul. The branches are the thoughts articulated. And the castle is the stronghold par excellence, shelter and prison at the same time, end quote. So the student's answer with regard to the gluttony, well, gluttony is one of the 7 deadly sins. So you see how even without knowing what the artist had been talking about, I got really close to the crux of the answer just by talking about the various ideas and how it hit them going on in the painting there. So when an artist embeds something in an intentional way, it can rise to the fore, even though it might be from a kind of an oblique angle. So let's talk about the Dust Lickers by Odd Neardrum. And here's the answer from the forum. The first painting I chose is Dust Lickers by Odd Neardrum. This painting is very dull in color and brown-centric. I like that. The paint itself has a very textural quality. There's two figures in the middle of the painting crawling along the ground and licking it. Both figures have blank white eyes. There seems to be a road in the background of the piece and a body of water. This painting drew me in because of how interesting the concept was. My first thought was that this painting could be showing a struggle as some kind of metaphor, that the two figures were licking dirt from the ground almost blindly. And it seems as if these figures are not aware of what they're doing, as their blank eyes and expressionless faces seem to be uninterested in their actions. It could also be that it's displaying someone's inner struggle or torment, like they're trying to lick the dirt from the road, but they physically can't, so they're just stuck in the midst of struggle. I like that. There's a lot of tension involved in that. I mean, the painting itself, in terms of its initial presentation, is kind of shocking and horrifying in some ways, just because of the look of it. And I should say here, without even going into my notes, that the things I know about Neardrum and his work is that as a body of work, there is kind of a Scandinavian mythology that happens in there. You see a lot of the outfits and some of the landscapes kind of represent the Scandinavian peninsular landscape in some ways, and the costuming sort of looks a lot like things from Swedish history, and Neardrum is sort of crafting his own mythology out of it, not in a Tolkien-esque kind of way that's very kind of grounded in a lot of answerable material, where there's a lot of backbone and structure and backstory to the a particular like a legendarium. Neardrum is really just kind of doing this pictorially, like painting to painting. So as you see more of the work, the more you get immersed in the world that he's trying to create, and then you start to kind of understand the nature of this sort of dystopian landscape and these dystopian figures that seem like zombified or very ill. You start to get kind of used to their presence, and so they become the actors in this world that he's creating. So that's kind of part of it. It definitely helps with the general understanding of it, but as you can see from this answer, there's this great metaphorical content that can be derived from just looking at the one painting itself. So I have some pretty brief notes on this, actually, that I have written down. So I said, Dust Lickers may be seen as an allegorical reference to how many people today consume television, media, celebrity gossip, etc., and expect these things to fulfill their desires, but as if they are eating dust and expecting to feel full. So coming at it from a very contemporary lens, looking at, which I like to do, looking at sort of the opposite of painting in terms of chronology of narrative. Painting is the old form, and all of our technology is the new form. So I like to think about how those things juxtapose themselves within a painting, a contemporary painting of today. And I think that sort of like eating dust and consuming sort of nothing, lots of nothing, is an act of futility, and kind of horrifying that one would continue to do so. And anyway, there you go. So next piece that we discussed was the Three Graces. So here's the forum answer. Three Graces is a very modern painting that I think can relate to this world a lot. The people in this painting take up the whole frame in addition to the city in the background, making it feel very crowded. The man in front is also blocking viewers from seeing the whole thing, and perhaps this is on purpose. He becomes the center of attention due to his disfigured body, which is very different compared to the other figures in the painting. The colors are bright and pleasing to look at. It seems like a sunny day in the city, and the fact that we can see things clearly makes us feel a little safer. The artist seems like he was very confident with his work. Everything is boldly colored, and it made it seem like he knew exactly what he was doing and what meaning he had for the piece. So I guess recognizing intentionality there, just in terms of confident painting style, which, that's a thing with representational work, I think, kind of embedded in there. Despite the bright colors, the three women look like a group of people I wouldn't want to hang out with. I feel like the stop signs in the background are trying to tell us to stay away from the figures, or maybe they're trying to tell us to stop, for them to stop doing what they're doing. Despite being with their friends outside on a wonderful day, they're all looking at their phones. They don't even notice the man they're walking past because they are so focused on their devices. Then there is the man, the only person in the piece that I might want to befriend. He looks sad and depressed, and regardless of how his body is constructed, he continues to play the guitar. I feel like this man is struggling. He is trying his best. I thought maybe this is trying to tell us that society makes the three women in the painting seem normalized, like it's the standard to be on your phone all the time, and normal for women to have big breasts and slim waists and show more skin than necessary. And the man is disfigured because he isn't like them. He is considered weird and an outcast. At least that's how I perceived it. So I like that. I like looking at the background, like those stop signs, which seem, in the red lights and stuff, which seem sort of incidental. But if you think about it, if you're a representational painter, it takes a long time to paint stuff. So you wouldn't make a point of putting things like that in there unless there was a reason for you to do so. It takes a look, it's the Treebeard, the Ent said it. It's just like, it's only worth saying something in Entish because it takes a long time to say, and therefore that makes it worth saying. So, not to drag that as a reference in there, but you know what I mean. You wouldn't spend that much time painting a thing in a painting like that unless it meant something. So, even something as incidental as background material is moving into the foreground of the figures in a narrative way and sort of creating a much fuller and broader spectrum of narrative than one might think, unless you look harder at the formal content. So that's the whole idea about the critical eye and formal content. And so my notes, the three graces have been depicted in art in countless times over millennia. They come from the 9 charities of Greek mythology, but generally the norm is to depict the three of them frolicking. They represent amusement, festivities. And Hergert characterizes himself as an urban surrealist, and he gets his inspiration from the dark underbelly of the city. He puts his own spin on the graces by writing, quote, "For some reason, watching a performance on your cell phone causes you to miss what's right in front of you. Faith, hope, and charity, the three graces, are lost in cyberspace," end quote. So it doesn't really give us a lot, which is fine, good, because we like that open interpretation. One thing that it doesn't really address is the strange disincorporation of the man figure sitting on the ground there. And I kind of like to think about that in a way that if people are looking at their phones, watching something, reading something, or recording something themselves, and walking, trying to sort of navigate the world and the virtual world simultaneously, you're going to kind of miss some things along the way. So what I feel ends up happening is that you're only getting bits and pieces of things as you walk by because you can't really concentrate on those two things at the same time fully. So you're getting just these little staccato visuals of it. So the man sort of broken up into pieces like that is if you sort of like see him from one angle and then you're still looking at your phone and then you kind of glance and you see him at another angle. So now he's almost become this sort of cubist representation of a person, which makes him in a way like a non-person because they're not really noticing him and they just kind of walk by. So I think that the student's answer kind of addresses that in a lot of ways, what I just explained. Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, so Max Renascence, Strangers in Paradise. Let's find the answer for that one. Sorry, give me a second here. I'll find it. I'm getting there, I promise you. Okay. Right, here it is, sorry. This painting seems to emulate styles found mostly in the Renaissance and Baroque period, with textures found in the background and figures, and most notably in the idealized forms of the nude male and female figures. I believe this piece is a commentary on works created during those times, due to the setting, a paradise with an idealized sky and landscape, and to strangers, quote unquote. Furthermore, there's a certain amount of absurdity with the strangers in paradise idea, as they do not know each other, there is no concrete location, and they are both completely naked. Therefore, I believe this piece is a commentary on the absurdity of Renaissance pieces that depict the same subject. I suppose in a modern context, we can sort of look at Renaissance pieces and neoclassical pieces as absurd because they are idealizations of things that look like they could have existed but never did. But that's the case in point when we talked about the whole idea of escape through painting in the salon. That was sort of like their movie theater. There wasn't movies at the time, so how could you escape into a landscape full of naked nymphs and satyrs running around, as I've showed you, to create a realistic painting of something that looks like it could be real, but it's not, and then you suspend your disbelief at the picture plane and you enter in the same way that you consume movies. So let me just throw up my notes on here. So here a young couple awkwardly stands naked in a pastoral landscape on a sunny day. She smiles for the camera. He looks down uncomfortably. Renascence says, quote, I find my figures in old nudist magazines and place them in landscapes inspired by old master paintings. I want to work in the great tradition without denying modern imagery. So the couple is iconography like Adam and Eve, but of course they are contemporaries searching for paradise. Their story is up to the beholder to imagine. So that's what I mentioned when I first presented those in the slides, that painting in the slides, is that there's a juxtaposition between what I feel is more of a neoclassical kind of background, sort of akin to a Nicolas Poussin or a Jacques-Louis David, and then these contemporary looking young people nude, with the accoutrements of like a contemporary time, and even in their attitude, the young man being, sort of embarrassed, and the girl being very forthright and smiley, just, with a candid picture across this background. And then the style of the painting sort of meshes it all together, recontextualizes these juxtaposed things into one unit. There's another contemporary painter named John Curran who does a lot of the same things. He uses much stronger imagery. Sometimes he's used old Swedish pornography and actually placed those figures, doing what they do in pornography right in the center of some of the compositions. Well, meanwhile, they're surrounded by this incredibly well-painted interior with, still life type setups of like tea sets on one side, and you kind of look at the whole thing and you start to wonder what really is the subject matter here. Is it the porn part? Or is it the whole thing? What is a masterpiece? What is painting? Is it the subject, or is it painting itself? And so there's no way to really answer that. It's really the artist having you struggle with those ideas, and kind of maybe coming around full circle on a series of ideas in that regard. So again, one of the ways in which contemporary painting can really work, even though it's a really old idea based in antiquity almost, and then you take contemporary ideas of psychology and recontextualizing and remixing, and you bring those together and it creates something wholly new. Okay, Ken Gregoire's Intimacy. Let's find that one. Here we go. This is just a fabulous painting. Just from looking at it, we get a psychological dissonance of the artist with the woman. The perspective is jarring and eerie, but it contains more of a narrative than Gregoire's other pieces. So this person looked at his other work. I guess they were very taken by it. That's good. Like the extra research. The table acts as a bridge to keep the lovers apart and for them not to show their faces. I'm curious if this is an affair or not. It's almost like pointing a finger at Gustav Klimt's The Kiss, that painting, in which the couple is in a harmonious embrace under a golden robe. I like to think that Klimt's painting depicts everlasting harmonious love, while Gregoire's depicts the psychology and discord of lust itself. Really great answer, looking at the formal, looking at the narrative and interpretive psychological content and trying to kind of bring them together on one plane. And then also looking at other works that reminded them of that. And other people actually cited Klimt in their answers too. So if that's the case, then there was definitely a reference for that. So you were all very correct on that. And when you cite something like that, when an artist, a contemporary painter cites a painting from the past in their work, there's a reason for it. And I think there's that story that was in The Kiss that sort of reified in intimacy, but in a different way because of the formal content and presentation. So here's my notes. Gregoire's use of perspective is intriguing, often giving multiple viewpoints in the same picture. In this scene, we see paintings leaning against the back wall, so we assume we are in an artist studio, seeing a relationship between the artist and model. The story itself is hard to discern on a specific level, but the languid poses of the figures convey a feeling of sadness. The time-worn nature of the furniture and walls suggests a kind of decay or time fleeting. Is the relationship over? Are these two about to be split up and are saying their last goodbyes? From the artist, quote, "Painting is the utmost devious and inefficient way to capture your ideas and emotions, but it's exactly that. The deviousness and limitations that come with it make the outdated art of painting so intriguing," unquote. So that's kind of reifies my answer, what I just said with regard to how painting can work in a contemporary context. So cool stuff. Okay, last one, Bo Bartlett's Going Out. Let's get the answer to that one. Again, sorry, I should predicate this. This student was uncomfortable with the Strangers in Paradise painting just prior to this answer, so they're referring back to that. Again, I feel slightly uncomfortable, but not in the same way as Strangers in Paradise. This looks like a date that the girl did not understand well. So the guy, dressed for colder weather, can't tell, but he looks like he might be wearing a wetsuit. There is a lobster trap in the boat with them, and it's empty. So judging by that and the title, I assume they have just left the dock and are on their way to go lay some traps and check them, and maybe the guy's prepared for getting in the cold water, hence the wetsuit. The girl looks like she's dressed for a picnic on a giant sailboat on a hot sunny day. She's wearing a pink crop top, but she looks cold by the way she's sitting with her arms very close to her body and looking off into nowhere. The guy is standing there steering the boat, looking ahead, and she is looking off canvas. Not in a wow, this is beautiful view kind of way. This is more of a, this is not what I signed up for and what am I going to do now kind of way. I look at this and think, yesterday this guy was talking to her about how he likes to go out in his boat, and this girl was thinking, oh, he's handsome and he has a boat. So she says, I love boats. And he says, really? You want to come out with me tomorrow? And she's like, oh, really? I would love to. So the next day she shows up looking like she's expected wine and a cheese plate and a picnic basket on a sailboat, and he's looking like he's ready to go catch some lobsters and crabs on his dinghy. And she doesn't know how to politely back out of it, so she just gets in the boat and is trying to understand how she got herself into this mess. And that's the narrative I created in my head when I saw this piece. I don't know how far it is from the truth, but I got that vibe almost instantly. I like the expansiveness of the narrative in that, and the dialogue inherent in that. But I mean, it's great because if you recall the painting, it's just the dory. That's the type of boat it is, a dory, with two figures in it, one at either end, just the water and the sky, and that's it. And you know, there's a little bit of motion with the waves and the dory kind of moving through. So it's very minimalist, and yet from that, this student writes this whole scene, and it's so plausible. I mean, yeah, that sounds like it happens, definitely, just based on that alone. So the narrative created by the two figures and the tension of them at either sides of the composition and what they're wearing, and you know, this lobster trap, and like all this stuff becomes, you know, little signs and symbols that when you add them together from a formal and a narrative interpretive point of view, it sums up into this much broader picture, this much broader narrative. So here's my notes on this. I give it a little background to Bartlett, I guess here. Bartlett splits his time between Maine, Pennsylvania, and the Oregon coast. Here we see a typical Maine scene of a lobsterman in full dry suit gear. By the way, it's a dry suit, not a wetsuit. The dry suit keeps the water out. Wetsuit actually makes you feel damp. So you need a dry suit in the Maine water because it's cold like all the time. Full dry suit gear, hauling a trap in a dory. Bartlett places a young woman as passenger at the bow of the craft, looking slightly unsure of this whole operation. With the two figures, we automatically get a metaphor of relationships. Note that the bait net inside the trap is called the bedroom. In fact, at the time of this work, Bartlett was going through a divorce, and recently met this young couple on Matinegus Island who were betrothed to marry shortly. The painting may indeed be a not-so-neutral statement about the institution of matrimony and how it might entrap people in a situation neither finds totally comfortable or compatible. So I kind of know a bit more about Bartlett and his career, the personal side of his career, as well as like some other things because of his relationship with the Wyeths, and it's a big interest of mine. So I did know, he was going through divorce, and he was gonna remarry. He was involved with this other female artist who was younger, and that might have been the catalyst of it for whatever. But the divorce was ostensibly probably really messy, as they are. And so he's got this place ensconced on Matinegus Island, which is a very remote island off the Muscongas Bay. And most of the people that live out there do lobstering and crabbing for a living. But there's also a few wealthy people that have homes out there, including himself. And one of the families that had an estate or whatever out there, one of the young women fell in love with a local lobsterman, and apparently they were going to get married. And Bartlett kind of looked at that and was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work out. So he was feeling pretty cynical at the time and made a painting that kind of expressed that cynicism about the institution of marriage and relationships, and how people kind of get trapped in those moments and maybe can't get out of it. So I think that what the student wrote here about, not understanding the situation and not being able to get out of it is pretty close to the mark, don't you think? So that's great. So I hope to do this again next week with regard to the discussion and kind of going back and forth between sort of my take on it and what students have written, because it's kind of like mimics what we did in class with regard to people raising their hand, having their say about a particular thing, and I can kind of sum up the idea and then move on to the next thing. So that's what I'm trying to convey here. So before I move on to the next thing and talk about what I want to set up for the work for the week in the discussion forum, I just want to talk just a moment about this sort of new paradigm of pass-fail and me excising the essays from the whole curriculum here. I decided on that once the school decided to go to the pass-fail format, because I feel like if somebody writes an essay that's extremely well-crafted and heavily researched and just, A+ level work, and then the next person comes along and writes something that's just average, just really average, minimal amount of work, but enough to get by. So you have sort of like C+, B- work, and then you'll have like this A+ work over here. But with a pass-fail thing, they're both a P. No matter how hard this person worked, or no matter not hard this person worked over here. It's not a failing grade, but it's still a pass. This is excellent, but the merit is not indicated, and so that's also just a pass. So I decided that in a place like an essay, that is a bad place in which to enact the pass-fail idea. So I decided just to take that out. People have written to me and kind of wanting to stay with their letter grade, and that will happen at the end of the semester. I don't intend to necessarily letter grade everything going forward from this moment on, just because if we're all going to be essentially on a pass-fail kind of playing field and pass-fail kind of work, then I believe that the sort of work that we're putting out there should be kind of reflective of the new paradigm. So some people want the letter grade and some people don't. The people who want the letter grade, it will be the merit of the work that they've done for me thus far, and then coupled with some of the stuff going forward. I know that seems a little oblique and vague, but I'm kind of put in a position where it's difficult for me to sort of to grade things in two different ways, and I also believe that in the sincerity of you doing work, knowing that ultimately someone else is going to do less work and get through the course with a pass anyway. So I'm not saying that that's what's in everybody's heart, whether on the good or bad end of things. I just think that there needs to be some equanimity, a level playing field in this regard. So I think this discussion forum thing is a great place to be for that. So my intention is to sort of take the discussion forum and elevate it a little bit more, and meet the dismissal and excision of the essays kind of halfway. So not bring it up to essay writing level, but maybe elevate the form of the discussion forum, as it were. And to be honest, the way in which everybody attacked it, for the most part, kind of made it into an elevated form to begin with. I was really impressed. As you can see, some of these answers are just great, really thoughtful, very considered, and very critical, done with a very critical eye. So I appreciate that, and I kind of want to take some of my the ideas that I had for essays and try and plug them into a discussion format. So that's what we're going to do. But before I do that, there's one more little thing that I want to mention, is that in one of those emails to me about that subject, a student asked about my studio, filming here in the studio, and they were like, hey, that studio is a pretty cool space. You want to give us a studio tour? Okay, I will. I'm not going to do it on this video. I'm going to do it separately because I think my illustration survey class would also enjoy a studio tour. So I'm going to post a separate video of just Rob's studio tour alone for everybody to take a look at. It'll be fairly brief. I'll just kind of describe what I do here and some of the stuff that's lying about. In the meantime, I want to talk about the assignment for the discussion board. So, remember I talked about I wanted to do the thing with JAWS? Well, we're still going to do that. We're just going to make a discussion out of it. And in terms of access, a student emailed me and said, if you go to Hulu, you can, if you sign up for like a free trial thing, so you look up JAWS on Hulu, sign up for a free trial on, I can't remember which channel it was exactly, but basically it's like a free thing, and for like a month, I think, and you just watch the movie, watch JAWS in a commercial-free, pop-up free environment, and then when you're done, you can just cancel that membership. And Amazon actually has the same thing going on right now too. So if you go on Amazon and you look up JAWS as a rental piece, you don't have to pay for it. You just sign up for the free trial. I think it's like Cinemax channel or something like that, for like a month. Watch the movie and then cancel it right afterward. No money changes hands, nothing. It's all good. So there's two solid free ways in which to watch the film. So I expect everyone will be able to do that, because I did, and it's not a problem at all. So now that we have two different ways in which we can watch the film, I just want to introduce it a little bit. There's going to be some prompts already there for you to look at, but I just, in the context of just like doing this video and as an introduction, so I don't have to write everything out in the announcements. I just want to talk about like some anecdotal stuff in my relationship to the film first. So it came out in the summer of 1975. And the summer thing is actually significant because JAWS is the archetype and the progenitor for the summer blockbuster. Because of the content of the movie, because it's about a shark that is eating people and then everyone gets scared out of the water, well, the the impact of the film on the general public in the summer actually scared people out of the water. There were way less people on the beaches that summer, and people who market and make movies kind of looked at that and said, wow, like that had like a profound effect on everybody. And not just because of the content, it's because everybody was home to watch it. So all the kids were home from school, and parents were vacationing over the summer. So summer's a vacation time, so everybody's there. So it got to a huge audience, and I don't know why it was only then that it clicked with Hollywood. That was just like, oh, we should release all the big money pictures in the summer, but that's what they did after the fact. So 1975 Jaws was the birth of the summer blockbuster. Now, in 1975, I was only 5 years old, so too young to go to Jaws. But it actually was shown the very next summer in 1976, when I was still too young to probably see a scary movie like that. And my brilliant father took me to see it, and oh, Jesus, did it scare me out of the water. I mean, I couldn't go near a pool. I couldn't go near like a puddle of water. I was so freaked out. I was fascinated by sharks as a result, which is a good thing, because sharks are cool. They're prehistoric creatures that have like evolved into these amazing hydrodynamic, eating machines, barely evolving out of Mesozoic time. But the idea of it, like, eating something that I can't see, like eating me, that just like flipped me out so bad for an entire summer. But I still loved it. And over the years, in watching it and getting older, it's a period piece in one way. I lived for a long time out on the east end of Long Island after I got out of college, and it's a very nautical and agrarian kind of society out there. It's very different from the rest of New York. It's much more New Englandy. It's a bit rougher, at least back when I was living there, and especially in the 70s. When I was a little kid, and the character of Quint, so the gruff, blue collar, super macho, walking id of a character, was actually based on a real person named Frank Mundus. And Frank Mundus was famous for landing by hand with rod and reel the heaviest white shark known to date. I think that record might still stand. It might have been broken by some people in Australia. I'm not sure about that. Haven't been following that record, But at the time, that was super impressive. And so my father, and I think this was like his heavy interest in the film when it came out, wrote for New York Newsday, and they had a Long Island division, which is called Newsday. And he had a beat where he interviewed people like personalities. And so when they found out that Quint was based upon Mundus to a certain degree, Peter Benchley had met him summering out in Montauk. We went out there. My father took me there, and he interviewed Frank Mundus, and I got to meet him. And unlike the character of Quint, Frank Mundus was a little more like what you think a fisherman would be like, kind of grumpy, kind of gnarly, and disheveled, sort of like a friendly pirate grandpa type, basically. So not all that intimidating, although his shop was, with all the shark jaws hung all over everything. It was actually very awe-inspiring for me as a little kid. So the film itself, some of you may know the backstory behind it. It was Spielberg's first film that actually had a big budget. He had filmed some small budget films beforehand. And this film, he was afraid that it was going to destroy his career because he had so many problems filming it. And it led to a lot of improvisational ideas throughout the film, improv with dialogue, improv with location, and even improv with special effects themselves, because the shark was built in like 3 different ways. It was built like a left side and a right side, kind of like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, and also a big, articulated front half, which is when you see it jump, spoiler, jumps on the boat towards the end of the movie. Not very realistic looking, but the biggest problem with that is that those pneumatic robot shark pieces. They tested them all to see if they worked in the water, except they tested them all in pools. So when they brought them to into the Atlantic Ocean off of Martha's Vineyard in the salt water, the hydraulics and the pneumatics just started to fail, because it's just, the salt was so corrosive. And you had, actors, sitting there ready to appear on set with the shark machine thing, and they'd get a call and just be like, yeah, shark's not working, we're suspending filming for the day while we work on the sharks. So you're getting, sorry, I'm on low power mode, you're getting people just getting paid to do nothing, and all your equipment is broken. So yeah, he was freaking out doing that. Also, in terms of structure, there's iconic sort of Spielbergian moments to the sequences in there. So I'm going to throw some prompts out there that ask you to look for them. You'll probably see them again if you look for them in movies of Raiders of the Lost Ark and stuff like that. They're very Steven Spielberg, even though they have their kind of historical context in Alfred Hitchcock and Robert Altman. He sort of takes it to another level just because of the content of the film. And the one thing that I really want people to get into, I'm going to just take my phone for a second. Sorry, I had to splice this little bit back on here because I was running out of power, so I was afraid everything was going to die on me. So yeah, I was talking about the iconic Spielbergian sequences that I want you to look for, but the bigger thing that I'm going to throw in the prompts is looking at the convention of masculinity between the three main characters of Brody, Hooper, and Quint, kind of what they represent and how it kind of changes them when they're faced with the kind of adversity that you see in the film. The film is a very kind of like a Moby Dick sort of tale that it kind of represents sort of like a man versus nature thing. So there's a lot to talk about in there, and how people react in a crisis, especially these sort of, in some ways, traditional masculine characters. Remember, this is 1975, so the type of characters that these three individuals portray or signify is kind of a product of its time, but Spielberg plays with that a little bit because of the adversity that takes place within the film. So that's going to be fascinating. So I want you to look for those things. So the prompts will be there for you probably now. I'll upload the video, so the announcements and the prompts should be there. So you can go read those and look what I'm going to be asking for specifically for you to discuss in the forum, and you can watch the film with that in mind, so you know kind of what to look for, what to be on the lookout for. I know a lot of you have probably seen the film already because it's an old film and it's a kind of a classic, and it's withstood the test of time to a certain degree. There are some aspects of it that are very dated, and those are very clear to see. But there are other ideas that happen in there, and that, like I said, it's like this Moby Dick kind of tale, which is, it's kind of timeless in that respect. It's a timeless man versus nature sort of story. So there's that aspect to it that makes it kind of fresh and fun, especially when you're looking at, for specific things that are happening in the film that you never really considered before. So that's what I'm asking you to do. So just to reiterate, free trial signups through Hulu and Amazon. So go sign up, put a free trial, watch the movie, cancel the sign up, no money, you saw it in high res, all good. So that part should be fine. Look for the prompts, watch the movie with the prompts in mind, and also be on the lookout. I'll send you a link for my studio visit video. So I'll do that, and I hope you enjoy that too. So take care, and email me if you need anything, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.